This is the EDAH project. The aim of the project is to return the station to long-term profitability as a pastoral enterprise. We've come to realise the only way to do this is through landscape regeneration.
The acacia shrublands within the southern rangelands of Western Australia once supported a thriving wool industry, but over the past 100 years, the region has suffered a progressive decline in landscape health and productivity. The cause of this decline lies in the establishment of permanent sources of water for stock, which has enabled continuous grazing of the rangelands by domesticated, feral and native herbivores. The underlying premise of the EDAH project is that unless we can gain control of the total grazing pressure on the property, the degradation of the landscape will continue unchecked and hence productivity will continue to decline. The various components of establishing this control include fencing to control the range not only of stock but also of feral and native grazing animals, the concept of rangeland self-herding to enable us to self-graze with few internal fences, and feed budgeting so that our stocking rate is adjusted at frequent intervals to the feed on offer. In addition to control of grazing pressure, we've come to understand the central role played by perennial grasses in both retaining water in the landscape and providing a source of metabolizable energy for stock. It seems clear that the loss of perennial grasses has resulted in the progressive decline in productivity over the past 100 years. We believe that the reduction of grazing pressure will allow these grasses and edible shrubs to re-establish in areas where they have been eaten out. In the initial phase of the project, we have completed a 30,000 hectare cell on some of our better saltbush and mulga country at the southern end of the property. The cost of fencing has dictated compromises in the design, which includes 11-line mesh with a single barbed wire at the top. We hope that in addition to limiting unwanted grazers, it will also help to exclude wild dogs. We are in the process of linking up with 3 neighbouring properties to create a larger cell with funds from the West Australian Government Wild Dog Action Plan. We are fortunate to have had the benefit of expert input from Hugh Pringle, who conducted a landscape rehydration workshop on the property, from Bruce Maynard and Dean Revell, who have advised on livestock self-herding and feed budgeting respectively, from perennial grasses doyen David Blood, and especially from Greg Brennan of Grazing Innovation, who has been a mine of information on multiple aspects of rangeland ecology.
The first stage of the project is creation of a 30,000 hectare cell. The purpose of the cell is threefold. Firstly, to exclude wild dogs. Secondly, to prevent entry of native and feral herbivores. And thirdly, to allow us to undertake rangeland self-herding of stock within the cell. So we've got a gully here, an erosional gully here. We've had to divert the fence around from the original path of the boundary fence. We've had to swing out around the head of the gully and then back onto the original fence line. So by building the diversion around the erosional gully, it allows us to treat the gully as a unit for remediation work and keeps grazing animals and vehicles away from the active erosion areas of the gully. This section of the fence crosses a creek, and what we've done is installed a lap wire here so the flow from the creek can pass underneath the fence. The base of the fence is raised, and we've attached the lap wire along here so any debris flow can go underneath the fence while still maintaining the integrity of the cell.
This diversion bank was put in with funds from Rangelands NRM in 2018. The purpose of the bank is to divert water flow away from the actively eroding creek bed in order to allow it to recover and to prevent the erosion progressively advancing upstream.
We're standing here on top of a levee bank that was constructed last year with funding from Rangelands NRM. If we look downstream to our left from here, we can see bare surfaces, active gully formation, dead vegetation, and we can see that all the topsoil's been washed away. By contrast, if we look upstream from where we are, the vegetation looks much healthier, the topsoil is intact, there are no gullies forming. We're in a small exclosure here, which means that this area inside the fence hasn't been subject to any grazing pressure. As a result, you can see numerous grasses within the exclosure. By contrast, over my right shoulder, the land is bare and devoid of grasses.
So I'm really happy to be involved in the EDAH project. What Angus and Toby are aiming to do there is to try everything at their disposal to regenerate that landscape. They've come to understand that the country could be producing better than it is now, and they've come to understand that at the base of all management in that sort of a system is control of total grazing pressure, particularly the perennial grasses, which we think are pretty key to the functioning of that system, both in terms of the ability of the landscape to hold water in the landscape and the ability of those perennial grasses to provide the metabolizable energy which is so necessary to balance the high protein level in the shrubs. The shrubs have got a mountain of protein, and that's available year round, and in many parts of the landscape for a domestic animal there is a deficit of metabolizable energy, and those perennial grasses are fantastic to supply that, because you can get a millimetre of rain and you've got green leaf from a perennial grass. So they are fairly pivotal to the functioning of both the livestock production system and the integrity of the landscape in being able to hold the water in the landscape.
We are very grateful also to the West Australian Minister for Agriculture, Alana McTiernan, and the Minister for Lands, Ben Wyatt, who have enabled pastoralists such as ourselves to participate in the burgeoning market for carbon credits. This means that we can obtain financial reward for facilitating landscape regeneration on our lease. We believe that with long-term stewardship and the generous assistance from the government agencies, we can restore this property to commercial profitability and help return the region to both pastoral viability and environmental sustainability.